Greetings, welcome, and thanks so much for joining me. It's Christian of Standing Stones Healing. Of course, here I am with my kitty who has to say hello and be in on the action no matter where I am and no matter what I'm doing. Full disclosure, sometimes when I go live or record a video, I throw her down in the basement. I just couldn't do that today. Well, anyway, here's my question for you. Is Reiki a saturated market? Is Reiki a saturated market? This is something that I have heard from Reiki practitioners, and I've actually been hearing it increasingly from Reiki practitioners over the past several months. Questions like, is Reiki saturated? Reiki is saturated. You can't market Reiki in a saturated market. Or how do you market Reiki in a saturated Reiki market? Well, in this week's episode of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast, we talk about whether or not Reiki is a saturated market. And the short answer is no. Reiki is not a saturated market. Now, of course, it might seem like Reiki is a saturated market if you are a Reiki practitioner, because you may be looking around and you may be saying, well, look at all of these Reiki practitioners. You know, I see this Christian guy all the time. He's always posting things. And there's one Reiki practitioner. And then we see another one and another one doing their thing online, maybe even in our local area. And so we are saying, look, there are just so many Reiki practitioners around. How is there any room for me? There is no room for me. It's important for us to remember when we are Reiki practitioners and we're tuned into Reiki, we're going to notice other Reiki practitioners. So we're going to look around and we're going to notice when we see Reiki, when it shows up in our feed, when we have videos shown to us on YouTube. By the way, of course, the way the algorithm works, if you watch one, YouTube's going to recommend another. And so we might we're tuned in to Reiki. And so we might have the impression that there's a lot more Reiki activity than there actually is, which can make us think that Reiki is saturated. But the truth is that Reiki is not a saturated market. And it's not because there are a heck of a lot more people who don't know what Reiki is and have never heard of it than there are who do. And so it's really important for us to remember that even though we know what Reiki is, and even though we're tuned into Reiki, and that we might be thinking about Reiki all of the time, most people, the vast majority of people, like 99% of people, aren't. So we're in the 1%. But really and truly, Reiki is not a saturated market. Now, of course, when we talk about saturated markets, this is location dependent. So it really does depend upon our location. And so if we live in central Nebraska, for instance, no one's going to know what Reiki is. Absolutely, Reiki is not a saturated market in central Nebraska. But if we go somewhere like Sedona, Arizona, a heck of a lot more people are going to know what Reiki is, and we're going to find a lot of Reiki practitioners in Sedona, and maybe even more Reiki practitioners than there are people who want Reiki and are looking for a session. However, still, maybe not. And so it's important for us to note the location when we're talking about market saturation. And it's also important for us to remember and recognize that even if we do find ourselves in a quote unquote saturated market, there are still things that we can do to help differentiate ourselves from others. None of us are the same. We are all different as people and as Reiki practitioners. And so we all bring our own personality, our own experiences, and our own special flavor to our Reiki business, to our Reiki practice, and to the community at large. And so it's very important for us to remember that even though we might find ourselves in somewhere like Sedona, that there are ways that we can differentiate ourselves from others. So it's very important to ask ourselves, how are we different and how can we differentiate ourselves? Now, I talk more about it in this week's episode of the podcast. The link is down below where you can tune in to learn more and listen in for more encouragement if you do find yourself in a saturated market for Reiki. But the truth is that so often when Reiki practitioners think that Reiki is a saturated market, the greater challenge, the real challenge, is marketing. And what they're really saying is, I'm challenged to market Reiki. I'm having a hard time marketing Reiki. And rather than admitting that marketing Reiki can be challenging, it's a lot easier to throw up our hands and say, well, of course I can't sell Reiki because the market is saturated. Of course I'm having a hard time starting or growing my Reiki business. The market is saturated. And so oftentimes we're looking for an external or extrinsic reason why we're challenged to start, build, and grow our Reiki business, when really the challenge is often much more our own challenge with marketing. Now, if this is the case, I really want to encourage us that you're not alone, that always we're going to have challenges with marketing. It's part of the experience, and just an encouragement to know that you're not alone in that, and no one is an excellent marketer from the beginning. I know for me personally, I've come a long way over the years in my marketing, in my business, and the truth is I still have a long way to go. I don't know everything there is to know about marketing. I'm still learning and growing, and I will be forever. And so when we start our Reiki business, when we're building our Reiki business, let's give ourselves a little grace and understanding that no, we're not going to be an expert at it right away. So do you think Reiki is a saturated market? Drop it down below for me. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your opinion on the matter. And yes, indeed, tune in to the podcast episode, standingstoneshealing.com/podcast. And I'll drop the direct link down below to tune in to learn more about marketing in a saturated market. And is Reiki really a saturated market? Indeed, there is plenty of room for everyone, including you, no matter where you are in the world, including online. So sending lots of blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.